6 years ago, the international and Arab media came out with the news that the University of Birmingham had tested the Quran manuscript and that the laboratory in Oxford had conducted a radiocarbon examination on it, which came out with the conclusion that this manuscript dates back to the years between 568 and 645 AD, with an accuracy of 95.4%. This period begins 2 years before the birth of the Prophet, peace be upon him, and extends until 13 years after his death. The University of Birmingham said in a news release, "The person who actually wrote it could well have known the Prophet Muhammad." It was not days or months before the skeptics of Islam jumped on the news. They said that this indicates that the Quran was collected from ancient manuscripts that preceded the Prophet, peace be upon him, as they took the chronological estimate prior to the birth of Islam, while other skeptics went in the opposite direction and rejected the date determined by the carbon examination and insisted that the writing on this parchment was at a later date, because they are still trying to pass their hypothesis that the Quran was developing and was not completed until after the 3rd Hijri century during the Abbasid era. That means over 250 years after the dates determined according to the radiocarbon test. This manuscript, and there are hundreds if not thousands like it, destroys everything the revisionist school have tried during the past 4 decades, while the scholars who are specialized in the study of old manuscripts, both Muslims and Western academics, some of them believed, based on the script, the number of lines in each page, the dotted letters, the separating marks between verses, the size of the folios, and others, that this manuscript dates back to the second half of the 1st Hijri century, while some returned it to the early 2nd Hijri century, and only one of them went to a later date. Before we look at this Birmingham manuscript, I will briefly speak about the development of writing the Quran in the 1st and 2nd Hijri centuries, so that we can understand what was meant when we said that the scholars dated that manuscript based on the writing style, number of lines, marks between surahs, spaces between verses, and other characteristics which led them to such estimates. Writing the Quran in particular and writing Arabic in general went through steps of development, progressing from a very basic rasm. Rasm means drawing the shapes of the letters and words. So we said progressing from a very basic rasm till it reached its almost final form during the 1st quarter of the 2nd Hijri century. Although the main method of preservation for the Quran was by memorizing it, Al-Hafaza, those are the people who memorized the Quran, Al-Hafaza were in thousands at that time. In addition to Al-Hafaza, the Messenger, peace be upon him, used to dictate the verses and surahs as and when revealed to him to a number of scribes, who numbered between 15 and in some narrations 43. Some of them were fully dedicated for this job. These written records were still secondary to the primary method of preserving the Quran, by memorizing it. This tradition of oral recitation and memorizing text and poems was common in Arabia at that time. Writing was only used to record loans, trading transactions, and treaties. Writers started recording the Quran on whatever medium was ready at hand at the moment of revelation, be it animal hide, parchment, rocks, leaves, bones, anything. But writing was still basic. It was not developed enough to enable a reader to pronounce the words as spoken, so it was used as a memory aid only. till few years after the death of the Prophet, peace be upon him, in the year 11 after Hijrah, the written records were treated as secondary to the thousands of al-Hafaza, the reciters who had learned the Quran directly from the Prophet, peace be upon him, and kept it close to their hearts. In order for the non-Arab viewers to understand what we are talking about, Arabic language have 28 letters. Several of them share the same rasm, drawing. They look exactly the same. They only differ by a dot or more above or under. For example, this shape, which is like a line B, is used when it comes in the middle of the word for 5 letters. We differentiate between them by adding dots above or under. Following illustrate this arrangement. As you can see, with introducing dots, the same shape letter, as shown in the figure on the screen, could provide the sounds of 5 different letters. This also used for many other letters sharing the same shape. If we look at that figure, this shape, if it have a dot under it, it will be B. Dot above it, it's N. Dot under it is E, Ya. I'll say them in Arabic. Ya. 2 dots above it is Ta. 3 dots above it is Tha. So one shape with a change of dots can give 5 different sounds or 5 different letters. However, the earliest Arabic writing did not have any of these dots. So reading this shape relied entirely on the reader to guess which one is it, which usually depends on the context. So if it was a long document, you will have a good idea which words is written in it. The table shown in the bottom of this page, from right to left. We started with the Bih, Nun, Ya, Ta, Tha. One shape, different dots. Then we have Sad, which could be Sad or Dad, if we add a dot. Then we have D, which can mean D, Dal or Dal. Then we have Ta, which can be Ta or Za. Now take the lower row from right to left. Then we have Ha, which can be Ha or Gim or Ha. Then we have Sin, it can be Sin or Shin. Then we have Ra, it can be Ra or Then or Dal. Then we have Ain, it can be Ain or Ghain, depending on the dot. So if it was a long document, you will have a good idea which word is written in such legal document. In reading poems, you already heard it or memorized it before. Same in reading the Quran. The reader had already memorized it before. He knew what he is reading before reading it. So the absence of such dots was not an issue for somebody who memorized what he is going to read. That's why this writing was mainly used as a memory aid. So writing the Arabic language was still very primitive. Many letters were drawn in the same shape, yet they presented different sounds. There was only 18 shapes, representing 28 sounds, or 28 letters. That was not all. There was also the absence of the short vowels, called tashkil, because the same letter, even after adding al-i'jam dots, which is the dots we put above it or under it to differentiate. So we said the same letter, even after adding al-i'jam dots, have many sounds. Like the letter L, lam or L, can be voiced as la, lu, and li. And if we add al-tanween, it can be said as well as lan, wilon. The example shown on the figure to the right hand, I'll read it. The top one, it's all al-rajul. Rajul means man. So the first one in the top, al-rajula, the a means we added fatha. Al-rajulu, it means we added dhamma. Al-rajuli, it means we added kasra. Then the fourth one, rajulan, and under it, rajulun. That's tanween. So there were no markings to tell the reader which one is it. Today, we distinguish between them by adding fatha, a dash above, for la, dhamma, small w, above, for lu, and kasra, a dash under, for li. These are the tashkil marks. That tashkil placed on the letters, especially in the end of the word, also determine the correct meaning of a sentence. For example, I'll say here two sentences, the same words exactly. The first one, دفع الرجل الولد. The second one, دفع الرجل الولد. What we change here is the tashkil, the short vowel marks. If we take the first one, دفع الرجل الولد, الرجل الولد, it means the man pushed the boy. If we take the second one, دفع الرجل الولد, it means the man was pushed by the boy. So the action, the one that have dhamma above it, like الرجل والولد, is the one who making the action, taking the action. He is the one who is pushing. And the one who have al-fatha is the one who was acted upon, like al-walada or al-rajula. With fatha, we understand that they are the one who were pushed. So notice how the meaning changes according to the change in the tashkil. The example shows that these vowels, like the one shown above the letter and the one shown under the letter, determine the sound of the letter. And according to such sound, any ambiguity in the exact meaning of the words is completely removed. I know it's difficult. That's why I published this research before in Arabic language. But many of you asked me for an English subtitles. It didn't work. So I made this English one, and still it may be difficult to understand. That's why I'll repeat again what I said before about al-i'jam dots and al-tashkil. So let's go back 2 or 3 pages before and repeat what I said earlier. First, al-i'jam dots. I'll start with this shape, which look like an angle, is used when it comes in the middle of the word for 5 letters. We differentiate between them by adding dots over or under. The following illustrates this arrangement. If we look at the figure to the right, now that shape, if we add a dot under it, it becomes ba, or B in English. If we add a dot above it, it will become noon, or N in English. If we add 2 dots under it, it becomes ya, or Y or E in English. If we add 2 dots above it, become ta, or T in English. If we add 3 dots above it, become tha. So with one shape, with changing of dots, we have now 5 letters and 5 different sounds. If we look at the second table in the bottom of the page, we'll start from right to left. We leave the first block, we go to the second. This is sad, sa. If we add dot to it, it becomes da, dot. The next one, that's dal, d. If we add dot above it, it becomes za. So d and za, dal and zal. Then the next block, this is ta. If we add dot above it, it becomes za. Next block from right again, in the bottom, ha. If we add dot under it, it becomes jim, like G. If we add dot above it, it becomes ha. We don't have that in English. Next one is sin. If we add 3 dots above it, shin. The next one is ra. If we add dot above it, become the. Next one is ain. If we add dot above it, become ghin. However, the earliest Arabic writing did not have any of these dots. So reading this shape, relied entirely on the reader to guess which one is it, which usually depended on the context. So if it was a loan document, you will have a good idea which words is written in such a legal document. In reading poems, you already heard it before and you already memorized it before. Same as in reading the Quran. The reader had already memorized it before. He knew what he is intending to read before reading it. So the absence of such dots was not an issue for somebody who memorized what he is going to read. That is why this writing was mainly used as memory aid. So writing the Arabic language was still very primitive. Many letters were drawn in the same shape, yet they represented different sounds. There was only 18 shapes representing 28 sounds, or 28 letters. That was not all. There was also the absence of the short vowels, called tashkil, harakat, tashkil, because the same letter, even after adding al-i'jam dots, has many sounds, like the letter L can be voiced as la, lu, and li. And if we add al-tanween, lan, and lun. Arabs at the early time knew which L it is as they spoke. That came naturally to them as they learned during their early childhood years. On the figure to the side of the page, we have, I'll read them. The word, the basic word is al-rajul. Al-rajul, meaning the man. Al-rajul. If we add fatha, the dash above it, it will be pronounced al-rajula. If we add dhamma, al-rajulu. If we add kasra, al-rajuli. If we add tanween, fatha tanween, rajulan. If we add dhamma tanween, rajulun. Without al. Tanween come without al in this case. So there were no markings to tell the reader which one it is. Today we distinguish between them by adding fatha above for la, dhamma above for lu, kasra under for li. That tashkil, placed on the letter, especially in the end of the word, also determine the correct meaning of a sentence. For example, now we look at the figure to the right hand of the page. And remember, Arabic read from right to left. The sentence A, دفع الرجل الولد. دفع الرجل الولد. Okay, notice we said الرجل. That means the man pushed the boy. دفع الرجل الولد. The man pushed the boy. If we take B and let us read it, دفع الرجل الولد. Now, الضمة is on الولد, not on الرجل. دفع الرجل الولد. That will mean the man was pushed by the boy. So the boy is the one who pushed the man. With the difference of tashkil, the meaning have changed and have changed entirely. The example shows that these vowels like fatha, kasra, dhamma, tanween determine the sound of the letter and of the word. And according to such sound, any ambiguity in the exact meaning of the words is completely removed. I must add here that this advanced writing style with full tashkil is mainly used in writing Al-Quran, in teaching books, and in legal documents where required. Otherwise, most of Arabic is written today without these tashkil marks. As I said, what we showed here is al-tashkil we use today. But what we use today is what was reached at the end of the development process. Al-tashkil took different form and shape before it reached the style I showed here. It was merely a dot with different ink color like red, above for fatha, under for kasra, and next to the letter for dhamma. As for tanween, double the dots. So at the time of the Prophet, peace be upon him, there were no tashkil, short vowels. There were no dots to differentiate between the letters which are drawn in the same shape. These dots are called i'jam dots. To add to above, at the time the letter alif was not written if it comes inside the word. This is still the way in writing only the Quran today. Accordingly, at those early years, in the first Hijri century, you need to know what you are reading before you read it. Such basic writing was mainly acting as a reminder. We know today that to write a clear verse, both al-i'jam dots, the dots above and under each letter, and al-tashkil, the short vowels marks, must be displayed to ensure that the reader who did not memorize the verses he is intending to read will be able to read and pronounce each word correctly. That was not the case at the time of the Prophet, peace be upon him, and at the time of the 4 caliphs. Writing was basic and limited to 18 shapes or symbols, representing 28 letters, without i'jam dots and without tashkil marks. Here is an example of such writing taken from the Birmingham Manuscript. The first line, as in the Birmingham Manuscript. You can see the writing. There was no dots above or under the letters and no tashkil. Now the second line, the same line after adding dots to the letters, no tashkil added. The first letter could have been nun, could have been b, could have been ya, could have been t, and could have been tha. But if I had already memorized it, I will know it is ya. So it's a yahdeen. Now the second line is after adding the dots to all the letters. The third line is as in the Quran today, including dots and tashkil. We can read it. يهديني ربي لأقرب من هذا رشدا ولبثوا. Now, before we leave this introduction, it is important to mention here that dots on some letters, not all, were found to be written as early as the year 22 after Hijrah, as seen in the writing on the Arabic papyrus PERF 558, found in Egypt, and in the Quranic inscriptions on Al-Aqsa Mosque, completed in the year 72 after Hijrah. Both showed that i'jam dots on some of the letters, but not all, were known and used early during the 1st century. We come here to the end of this episode. We will, inshallah, continue in the next episode the history of the writing of the Quran and the main points and objections raised about the radiocarbon dates. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.